a panel discussion now. Arturo Bris will join us a little bit later. PAVLO KLIMKIN, I'm very glad to see him here as well. I know he had some health issues, but is strong on the video. And then my good colleague Fernando Alberti, Professor Fernando Alberti from the MLC network, who was kind enough to actually offer to take over the moderation of our session. I will stay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our discussion. But before we do so, please note that you can ask your question to our speakers. To do so, please use the Q&A button. Your questions will be moderated. The speakers will answer them during the Q&A session. We're starting our panel discussion on competitiveness drivers and new normal to learn how we can thrive in the new reality. Please meet our distinguished panelists. Professor Fernando Alberti is chairing the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Competitiveness at LIUC University in Italy. He is also a part of MOC at Professor Michael Porter's Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness at Harvard. Professor Arturo Bris is the director of the IMD World Competitiveness Center and a passionate researcher of global competitiveness, financial development and macroeconomics. He is also a research associate of the European Corporate Governance Institute and a member of the Yale International Institute for Corporate Governance. Mr. PAVLO KLIMKIN is the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. He is also the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Ukraine.
You may start, Christian.
Well, you know, you've heard the introduction of our very esteemed panel of colleagues. I wanted to hand it first over to Fernando to talk a little bit about both his work on manufacturing, where I know he's been thinking a lot about how the pandemic has changed the outlook on competitiveness, or what can be done, and hand over the baton a little bit to him to steer us through this panel. Fernando, please.
Thank you so much, Christian, for opening the stage today. And well, yes, we have been doing a research on manufacturing clusters, more specifically after the pandemic, and the idea was to look a little bit more into the main drivers that are actually occurring outside. So the idea was to just to look ahead, but also to look at the current situation of clusters all over the world. So we built a panel of 12 colleagues from around the world to check for different situation of clusters, especially in the manufacturing industries. And we come up with kind of interesting triggers when it comes to companies to go along the path of your keynote or your presentation. The first one has to do with the fact that the pandemic has accelerated very much the connection between manufacturing and servitization. So we have been talking very much about servitization for many years, but now what we are seeing is that the pandemic has transformed into a digital world. All the different industries, especially the manufacturing industries. So there's been a kind of, you know, acceleration in the process of IoT and digitization into the manufacturing. The second one that we notice is the fact that clusters are actually becoming more and more a clear, real player when it comes to competitiveness, as Professor Porter said at the beginning, and according to what you just said, But more specifically, clusters are becoming a real platform for collaboration and for collaborative innovation more specifically. So the idea is that they constitute a base for trust and for respect of the many different stakeholders that in a way may play the role of a parachute for innovation to occur, but also for collaborative innovation to occur. So we have been seeing during the pandemic many different examples of manufacturing dealing with the health system or manufacturing, reconverting, all of a sudden introducing new innovations, maybe together with the makers community, with the 3D printers. That was, you know, a kind of very, very speedy reaction to what we were living. But this is connected to the third thing that we notice in our research on clusters, and I think is kind of beneficial for the debate we're having today, is the fact that cluster can provide actually also a very good ground when it comes to the turn that we went through after the pandemic, which is the one of combining sustainability and strategy for competitiveness in a real way. So cluster demonstrated all over the world in many different examples, and we collected several evidence and several examples in our work, that they may play a very good playground when it comes to the strategies for creating shared value. So for the strategy for, you know, upgrading the sustainability of places and countries from the environmental point of view, but also from the social point of view, you know, combining many different you know, requests, but also many different opportunities that might come from a totally different kind of approach to competitiveness to business. So I'm going back to the point that Professor Porter raised earlier today regarding the social progress index. And this is actually the main thing that I perceive, I believe, the pandemic transform when it comes to competitiveness and the cluster level, because, you know, it seems that we have been living a kind of globalization of people at the beginning, a kind of globalization of goods, and then we are living a sort of globalization of ideas, no? So it seems that we are all on the same agenda when it comes to understanding that we need a totally different word, the thing that we are calling the new normal. But this kind of different word goes through the lenses of creating shared value. And we all notice that this is very much possible to be done inside a cluster organization, a cluster setting, where different stakeholders, they collaborate with each other and they exchange resources for the sake of creating innovation. Of course, we also dig very much into at the firm level, no? Because we are strategy professors, so we very much deal not only with competitiveness at the very high level and microeconomics level, but we deal very much at the firm level. But when it comes to the firm level, what we notice is the fact that firms are very much focusing on what we call the extendable core, so a very clearly defined core business, but which is you know, capable of being extended to the adjacent business in a very easy way through skills that might be transferred horizontally and not vertically in the industry. So again, once again, the cluster, it's a good arena, no? to develop those competencies and to develop those skills that are not vertical, not specifically industrial skills, but they might be more horizontal. And this is also, I think, linked with the thing that Christian KETELS was referring back earlier today. So the fact that we need to prepare more and predict less, which is very much connected to the fact that what we notice is that those firms inside clusters that are performing better compared to others are those who are not just, you know, taking into consideration trends, but they are actually enacting those trends, trying to understand which are the main triggers of those trends. Which doesn't mean that this doesn't mean that we want to predict more, but it means that we want to incorporate a little bit of the trend thinking and the trend-driven innovation into the day-by-day activities of firms if we want to be more more competitive. So even once again, what we notice is that clusters are kind of a good platform also when it comes to exchanging those ideas to understand better which are those trends that will occur most likely, and they will occur in a more shorter times compared to others. So exchanging information, exchanging knowledge, again, it's a good input on that. So, Christian, do you want to get back on the moderation?
Yeah, before we get in, Mr. Klimkin, I actually wanted to get back to you, Fernando, with a question. Thank you for your comments. But I talked a little bit about the fact that COVID has accelerated or changed some of the big trends that were already ongoing. I was wondering whether you could talk some more about the changes that you see specifically in manufacturing. I think manufacturing, many countries see this as a critical way to development, but we also talk a lot about servitization, digitalization, the discussions about global value chains in manufacturing and so on. Is there anything that you are hearing also from the makers community about what they see, how the competitive reality in manufacturing might have changed for good in the response to COVID?
Thank you so much for that. Of course, manufacturing is one of those industries that has been very, very much hit, and especially I'm thinking about those traditional manufacturers. We collect a lot of evidence worldwide on those industries that are very much diffused worldwide, like the textile industry, for instance, and of course they've been very much hit by the pandemic. The main thing that I was saying before is the fact that on one side we see a blurring of boundaries between the manufacturing industries and the service industry. So on one side we notice that we have servitization, but on the other side we also notice that we have productization. So many different clusters in the service industry, they're actually blurring with manufacturing. This opens up to new opportunities for manufacturing to introduce new scenarios and to hybridate the global value chains in a novel way. And the other thing that you were suggesting is the makers community, which has been very much studied by us, and it evolved very much in the recent years. So we don't have to refer back to to sparse individuals or to communities of thinkers and people that are kind of not prepared to play a role in the global competitiveness. But we noticed this through the pandemic. That community of innovators reacted in a very speedy way and in a very effective way. And this proves again the fact that multinational firms together with small firms and artisans and very skilled professionals might work fruitfully together when it comes to redesigning in a very quick way the way of producing. Of course, the main opportunities are not the one of just reacting to the pandemic and producing masks or producing those devices for breathing that we saw through the makers community. But the most important opportunities that we saw through the pandemic is the fact that you understand there are new entrepreneurial opportunities that you might jump on and spot those, redesigning completely your value chain. And that's also the reason why I was referring back before to the shared value paradigm, because most of the most competitive companies that we study worldwide are those who understood that it's better to redesign what they are doing and to redesign their business model and to tackle real needs for the world, which is I think the real interpretation of what we mean by the new normal. So realigning the business side with the social side for the sake of innovation that is really impacting for our world. So it's a different kind of level of producing value, which has not just to do with productivity, but it's the productivity square, because we're creating value for something that is actually very much meaningful for all of us.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just reflecting on I think what we've been hearing also for our audience is really that we have to think about almost two levels. There's the one level that you talked about, how can firms respond to this really changing environment, both in the crisis, but also in the new normal. And what does that mean for strategy, for operations, for including shared value, and which shared value will also be a topic tomorrow at this conference. And then there is another level, which is maybe more the policymakers, which is, how can we then in the context make the appropriate changes so that our companies have a good chance to succeeding in this type of environment. I don't know whether we should then, bring in PAVLO KLIMKIN, both in his role as a former government official, but of course also as a Ukrainian, to share a little bit his perspective on what you've heard from Michael Porter, from Fernando Alberti and myself on these kind of sometimes somewhat abstract ideas. How do you perceive them from a Ukrainian perspective? Can they give you some guidance to lead your country forward after this crisis?
Thanks, Christian. It's really an honor to be among you, and it's quite difficult to step in your footsteps. I mean, Michael, yourself, and Fernando, as a humble politicians, because you are all in a way strategy professors, and don't get offended by this definition. I mean it in a positive sense. But normally politics is not about strategy. Politics is about lack of strategy, especially in current times, what Michael has just mentioned and what you have just mentioned. So let me give you any kind of mapping out of a couple of key points for further discussions, how I feel about all the changes around. My first point. From the very beginning, of this pandemics, there were a lot of different discussions about kind of new normal. That basically the past reality was not there anymore. But if you look around now, COVID has not changed the world. It's still there. It's still kind of old normal around. But what COVID made obvious is that the current reality is not sustainable. It can't function the way it does. It's over. But the real challenge for the situation we are in, everybody is talking about the future. But there is a fundamental lack of vision in the sense of pushing us to the future. Even if you have a look on the possible answers to COVID, they were from the very beginning mainly or fully national. Although it's quite understandable, it should have been a kind of global approach, but it was not there. And if you see different answers to technological challenges or climate challenges, it's actually going not the right way. It's going in the sense of fragmentation. So my first point, the current architecture around us, let's call it world architecture after the World War II, is in a fundamental crisis. Of course, we've been following a number of shifts, and two major shifts. It's a kind of geographical one towards Asia. It's all all the way through we've been following, but also the one from the rule-based world to a kind of power-based world. Let's call it. It's a sort of oversimplification, but still. And the oncoming presidential elections in the United States will have a fundamental impact, both on this architecture with Asia and China, and of course, this balance between the rule-based world and the power-based world. But so far, of course, it's created a lot of different unpredictability and certainty gaps. And of course, we are talking a lot about political vision, common vision, political will and action, but it's clearly not there if you have a look both on national level and especially global level. And on the top of that, and it was a very good point from Michael Porter for me, we are in a state of crisis for the sort of notion of representative democracy, because before it was about rational choices and choices among different elites. Now it's not about rational choice anymore, clearly, and it's not about choice at the elite level. So it's something completely different. But don't take me wrong, it's not about preaching catastrophe or panicking about unpredictability. But what is clear now is that we need to draw clear conclusions from the situation where we are in. And for me, it's just about a couple of fundamental conclusions. Firstly, business can't sit, aside and simply follow what politics will do in the future. This model is over. I mean, business needs a kind of proactive approach. Business needs to work consistently with politics and impact politics. And I mean it as a politician, if you like, but also civil society. And it now becoming, especially after COVID, it's now becoming existential. Business can't simply wait for a kind of political response and better response from politics. It's over. Because competitiveness should be shaped up by creative people. And unfortunately, and I'm saying it as a politician, normally politicians are not the most creative ones here in these current realities. And even more to the point, politicians are interested in reincarnations themselves in the current reality and not a kind of success for this reality. My second point is about resilience, and it was a very good point from you, Christian, about resilience. But I really mean it. We need to change even the concept of resilience, because now the conflating of different risks and challenges is unprecedented. You see different scope, you see different level. The whole sense of risk analysis should be changed, and I've been working now in a kind of project on risk analysis, both for Ukraine and for Ukrainian business with a number of experts. And I believe that risk analysis, changing checklist, changing approaches, changing methodology, or at least checking methodology would be fundamentally important for business. And it should be done now, not tomorrow or after tomorrow. My third point, we need we are all in a kind of state of fatigue because of all this lockdowns and all kind of stuff. We intrinsically, subconsciously would like to get to a kind of old normal, not the new normal we are all talking about. It's a double way for people. So we need to humanize the whole sense of business approach, not just customize, it's a normal point, yeah? But also humanize this approach. My next point, and sorry, I'm a kind of, not normal politician. I come from a different background. I'm a physicist by education. And I believe that big data will become really big. You understand what I mean after all this COVID pandemics. It will be a big point with all kind of artificial intelligence algorithm and if you like, my definition of black swans is that it's something which could not be predicted by big data algorithm. So in this sense, for example, COVID is not exactly kind of black swan event. The last point, again, as physicist, I believe in a fundamental paradigm shift on technology in the coming years, and it will be about artificial intelligence. It will be about definitely kind of link between quantum electronics and brain cells, and many more. So basically embracing technology and focusing on human health because it could play big is for me one of the key tendencies for the future. Look, to cut it short, because I would like to leave a bit of time for further discussion. I believe business simply has to get proactive now in the sense of impacting politics, in the sense of shaping up possible answers together with politics, and even, sorry for not being politically correct here, for politics. Because you know, business is normally more proactive, definitely more creative, and eager to take up important risks, understanding what it's gonna take in the future. And it's not a case for politics, both globally and nationally. So good business networks, like the network Michael basically described for us, is fundamental for the future. But you know, simply to pull it off in the future, we need to start working at the level of business, even pushing politics and pushing civil society for the new normal, because the new normal won't come as such. Otherwise, it's gonna basically take us over, and we will live in a kind of reality we simply won't like to live. Let me stop here, and I would be happy to engage on any of these points. And look, I wanted to be at least a bit provocative. Otherwise, our discussion is not to get everyone bored.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You know, you're not a typical politician, and I think that gives gives your comments kind of a very interesting angle. I would say, though, that we also need politicians. You know, we need the dynamism and entrepreneurship of business people. We need, hopefully, the ideas and neutral approach of academics, but we also need politicians to help us organize that type of collective action. I think that's what I've often seen in competitiveness, that it really is often a political problem. How do we create an environment where we make, you know, large groups change, and that's what some business people are very good at. Many not necessarily, because that's not what they usually do. Unfortunately, I will have to leave. Actually, if I may, Fernando, leave with one last question to Mr. Klimkin, and that's really about the situation in the Ukraine. You know, I mean, I think you also characterize, you know, the big issues and changes around us. You know, we talked about COVID, about the need to change new. The Ukraine already had a lot of very difficult problems to deal with, you know, before COVID, in its economy, its relationships with Russia, and so on. Do you see enough discussion happening in the Ukraine about, you know, this longer term path towards a better future, or is it very focused on the hard problems that are there now, with kind of limited bandwidth to go beyond that? How do you characterize the situation?
Look, Christian, thanks. It's indeed a good one. My simple and short answer is definitely no. The reason why the answer is no, look, I firstly believe that us Ukrainians, we have a very strange fundamental aversion to any strategy, and it's a part of the way how we feel each other. You know, for us, you know, today, you know, this evening or tomorrow morning is something we can take on board, but you know, tomorrow's evening is something which is quite distant. So to have a real strategy, to have a vision, and to have, of course, a clear way how to realize this strategy, and there should be a political will in realizing strategy is not there, and unfortunately, it's a point for all 30 years of our independence. Secondly, normally when we have strategies or so-called strategies from different government bodies, it's a very long kind of 60, 80 or more pages of different measures without clear link, without overarching goal, and without clear way how to deliver on it. And it's what I wanted to break as a politician, as minister, firstly as a diplomat, but unfortunately, it was more than a challenge, I would say. And of course, it has to change. It has to change because without clear strategy, and you remember the famous joke from the Alice in Wonderland, you know, where should I go and where do you want to get to? You know, the simple point, like you've mentioned, you can be flexible, you can be effective, you can be, you know, adaptive, but you need a strategy. Without an overarching goal, you are nowhere. And fundamentally, this shape of the future is something which lacks discussion here in this country.
So thank you so much. I'm taking over to Christian KETELS' moderation because he has another meeting to join in a very short while. So I would like to thank Christian for being there. And thank you, Mr. Klimkin, for this interesting approach to politics and to the way you see the way politicians should be engaged into into competitiveness. This is actually one of the, let's say, main reason why Michael Porter created this network in 2002, which is the one of clarifying about competitiveness, and especially clarify about the different layers of competitiveness, where of course politics is one of those, and the government is very much important to that. But firms as well, So the idea is to create a sort of common understanding, a common language to all of us to understand competitiveness and how to tackle into it. I'm collecting a few questions from the audience, and I think one of those could be directed to you, Mr. Klimkin, because you are knowledgeable when it comes to Ukraine. Some are asking, given the fact that clusters are considered to be very much relevant when it comes to competition and when it comes to regaining competitiveness, even in this pandemic time, which are those impediments or those, how can I say, on the positive side, or drivers that might facilitate the acceleration of cluster in Ukraine? Because it seems that from some of the questions that the experience so far is there, but it's a kind of, it's a sort of not best in class when it comes to cluster and to cluster organization, especially according to your experience as a politician, as one of the most relevant former actors in this scene. What do you think is the one ingredient or the main issue that is missing to have all those clusters up and running in Ukraine as well?
Look, it's really a good point here, because firstly, it's about playing field. for business in Ukraine. And we all know way too well what are the fundamental impediments. And it's about rule of law and fundamental lack of predictability, how the rule law system functions in Ukraine. It's about law enforcement agencies. It's about red tape, which actually, had been cut quite considerably over last years, but not to the level it should have been. But also a number of issues on the top of that. But the most fundamental issue is the way how our economy, our business and politics is structured, is shaping up in economic clans, which are not just economic clans, but also, fundamentally impact politics. And this impact, unfortunately, has not been getting to the right point. The other way around. And the second point, I am a big fan of creating ecosystems as a nurturing soil for such clusters. I earned my first money in IT. I'm a physicist, but also started my career in software production. And if you have a look on our IT industry, is growing reasonably well. There are more and more interesting examples, and actually a lot of creativity, a lot of good approach, I would say, not only in Kiev but in Lviv and Kharkiv now. But what it's gonna take is firstly a clear governmental policy towards facilitating such clusters. You need a kind of policy frame to make it happen, to facilitate, to help along. And it's not there because it's all focused on big clans and oligarchs. And you can create competitiveness by simply managing different clans and not clusters you've just mentioned. And my third point, is about political mentality here, not business mentality. Business is far better, but political mentality, which is too, how should I say it, too peripheral. Too focused on just Ukraine as such and not focused on changing it to the future. So 1, 2, 3, basically, the policy framework, secondly, the lack of specific policy framework for facilitating clusters and for helping them along. And the third one, what I've just mentioned here. Of course, you can go deeper in all of these points, but all three are fundamental impediments to get more effective and better. And I believe from the quality of Ukrainian people, from the quality of Ukrainian business, we can do far better than it's the case now. And basically, the ideas are there. The way how to do it is also there. But it's again about vision, strategy, and what is the most important point, political will, which is definitely not there.
Thank you so much. I'm keeping the debate alive, so I was checking all the questions from the audience, and there are several points to topics that you touch upon, to topics that me and Christian KETELS touch upon. There is just one quick thing that I would like to ask you again, and then open again to the Q&A from the audience. One point that you raise is the point of data, no? So you talk about the data lake and the big data that are becoming even bigger compared to the past. So there is a question from the audience that say, what about the transparency of data, and how I would also add that the security of data, according to your experience, will affect competitiveness of different countries now? Because Of course, we have been talking for quite a while about the security of data and the exchange of data and the availability of data, but we have been talking about an economy that was very much based on information per se. But now we have the IoT, the Internet of Things. So data are actually entering physical products, no? So I was in a debate yesterday, and they were talking about the importance of designing objects now since the beginning with the security of data in it. Otherwise, we will affect competitiveness in a strange way. I'm thinking about, for instance, the security of cars, the security of biometric data, or the security, I don't know, of a pacemaker. When you tap into those flows of data, of course, you might affect products and not just information. So according to your experience, how the transparency of data and the security of data might affect competitiveness, and on the other side, how might we use this to boost our competitiveness and to boost the competitiveness of Ukraine?
Look, we need to divide, I think, not fully, but still partially, the issues about big data and processing big data. With the online drive, we're gonna have in the nearest future, and it's already there, but it's gonna accelerate. It's gonna fundamentally accelerate, because now there is a kind of rule for business: if you are not online, if you are not visible, if you are not effective online, you are simply not there. Of course, there are some, key examples which differ, but fundamental rule: if you are not effective online, you are not there anymore. As simple as that. But it means that you need to produce and you need to present a considerable amount of data in real time. This data is always available, or partly available, at least for those who wanna, let's say, analyze it, or use it, or even misuse it. Of course, it's about policy frame, and it's about cyber, because cyber will get to another level. I mean, in the coming years. I pretend to understand something about it, because firstly, I'm also, I have a degree in applied math on the top of physics, and secondly, in the run-up to the recent presidential elections, I wanted to get together different bits of our IT business to create a sort of resilience platform. Resilience platform, resistant to possible meddling, whether it's Russian or other meddling. And I have to say it was only partly successful. I have some points to boast. I have some points, let's say, to have another look on that. But fundamentally, we need a business to get together into a kind of unwritten code or written code, whatever, on the different platforms to effectively interact and, like I've said, to push the government for better cyber response. It's gonna get really big. It's one point. And the second point, it's about processing of big data, because now you have a lot of interest in, what does it mean, interesting? Okay, effective algorithm based on artificial intelligence. They can predict quite successfully, different outcomes. Of course, we've just heard from Christian, is predict less, prepare more, but prediction is important, especially if you have such an exploding big data around you. And there are a number of smart guys who want to make money of it, or, to make trouble. To make money is one case, and to make trouble for you, not only in a business sense, is another one. So for me, resilience on cyber, resilience on managing your data is an important part of any resilient checklists for any businesses, definitely including Ukrainian ones. But I've been working with many people around the world, and basically my impression is that the people are not ready. No, I'm not talking about all businesses, but even kind of renowned companies are not ready. They are in the process of simply trying to grasp what it's going to take in the future to be effective on big data. It's quite famous in politics. It works quite well now. You have a lot of open source information. So in any business, possessing skills or for working with big data will get enormously important in the coming years. So cyber and resilience on big data should become indispensable points of all checklists. And for Ukraine, of course, because of lack of financing, we could not have the most effective policy framework here. It's about best specialists, best IT specialists we are unable to pay in the government. It's about effective network. It's about effective interaction of law enforcement agencies, which probably does not work exceptionally, I would say. Let me put it this way, in Ukraine. So we have quite a space to improve here, definitely. But business, again, should play a proactive role here, because at the end of the day, it's about business interests.
Thank you so much. This is a super interesting perspective, especially given the fact that you have a physics background, and I will not engage in debating what resilience is for you, given the fact that you are such an expert in the topic, no?
Not exactly. No.
Well, I was looking at the questions in the chat from the audience, and there are a couple of them that are kind of connected to the things that we were debating. One has to do with the topic that you were referring to when it comes to information and data, but in a different field. So the question was from someone that I know working in China and leading a business school in China. And he says those companies that are proving to have the most higher difficulties when it comes to competitiveness are those who have the lowest levels of redundancy. And this is actually something that is connected to what you were saying, because it's not just the redundancy of data and information, which is becoming crucial, super crucial, but it's also the redundancy of all the other resources that you might have inside your firm and in the entire value chain. And this is exactly what we saw in the investigation of manufacturing clusters competitiveness worldwide. So redundancy in resources, especially those who are in the value chain, it's super crucial to maintain competitiveness. We have been so much, forced to go for a very lean practice and to squeeze as much as possible all the resources inside the firms, that maybe we forgot about the importance of being prepared for redundancy. But redundancy, according to the things that you were just saying, is also something that we might mean as the redundancy of preparedness. So the capability of reacting in many different ways now, which is also a good way to think about you as a resilient organization. So the fact that you might have different kind of angles to tap into. And this is, of course, something that we might also move to the cluster level and to the country level as a thing. And well, I don't know if you have a point on that regarding Ukraine and the approach to redundancy in Ukraine, but as I see in many different other countries, most of the let's say the companies and the value chains, they've been very much working on cutting resources and cutting the redundancy to get prepared for a very fierce competition. And now that we are through the crisis and through the pandemic, they are in big troubles, no? Because they don't have any kind of plan B or plan C or whatsoever. And I'm thinking loud also to the fact that this is also something that we might apply to leaders, no? And to the plan B and the plan C, to those who might be, you know, guiding firms. And sometimes we don't have succession plans when it comes to family firms, or we don't have succession plans when it comes to big multinational corporation with big managers leading the show. So redundancy it's a new word that we have to deal with, together with the one of resilience. So what do you think about that?
Look, I would be extremely cautious now with pushing on this issue. And the last, let's say, 6-7 months actually have shown us quite well that resilience is firstly about the minimum level of internal resources, different kind of resources, not just you know, logistics and finance. It's normally about skills, and you need some set of skills to be self-sufficient in an effective business. You need some scope and set of skills in any company to be, I would say, minimally resistant to big shocks. What normally is now called resilience, but resilience is for me wider notion for that, if you like. So in a kind of world where we have the uncertainty index definitely growing, and there are a lot of research on that, but the fundamental uncertainty in this world will definitely grow on a number of factors. And the confluence of these factors, as for me, you know, and I did my master degree on phase transitions. And when you have phase transition, you have a confluence of 2 or 3 factors basically get into a kind of synergy. And this synergy could basically blow up the current reality around you. So I believe that businesses have now to reassess their approach to redundancy, not only in the sense of financing, which is important, or logistics, but mainly human resources and specific skills. You can't just get these skills from everywhere, outsource the skills and say, okay, in the sense of shock, we will simply draw more resources and it will be fine, because everybody would be interested to draw such resources, and you could be not able to get such resources in real time. So fundamentally, when you have all kind of shocks, whether it's hybrid, whether it's biological, whether it's cyber, whether it's information, whether it's everything else, and you understand that uncertainty has been growing, you need to have a fundamentally different approach to redundancy. It's my point. It's not about getting less effective. Don't get me wrong here. But it's about completely different approach to redundancy. And simply to pull it off, I've seen a point about big data, a question from Mr. Sudarkin, and he has a point, definitely. That big data and misuse of big data could be used and will be used against weaker economies. It's about getting benefits in real time. It's about creating different spin about your image, like in the case of IKEA, you know, he mentions, you could be quite creative on that. And it will get bigger, and the only way is to create a kind of very, how should I say it, very flexible structure within the government, which is able to react to such challenges. But it could not be done in a kind of vertical integrated way, because otherwise you are nowhere. You know, have a look on Russia. With all kind of resources, they're so inflexible in their responses, because their chain of command is like that. But we have a different problem. We have a problem of inefficiency and incompetence there. So okay, everybody has its own set of problems and challenges.
Thank you so much. Well, I think that the point that you raised regarding skills is very much in line with the things that I was about to say before. No? So the fact that companies not just have to invest very much in different kind of resources, but especially in human resources and those skills that I called before the transferable skills. So those who are horizontal, that you might use it in many different ideas and business. So to get prepared again for a different kind of redundancy or a different kind of resilience, which is the one of adapting in a nimble way to the things that are happening, and not just stick to one specific vertical industry. And then this is proved to be a good recipe for success worldwide. I just want to ask you a quick thing that I am collecting from the Q&A, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to have a point of a politician today, because and then I will move on to Professor Arturo Bris, who joined us to the panel. So there is someone asking a very interesting question, especially for someone like me who is Italian and we are living this, and he's saying, what do you think about introducing the universal basic income to people, and how this might affect competitiveness? So I have a clear understanding, given the fact that my mentor, Professor Porter, very much clarified in the past about that, and the importance of creating a real prosperity and not a sort of artificial creative prosperity in people. But I would like to have your point on that, given the fact that we have such an important politician today with us.
Okay, it's a good way of teasing me up in a very friendly way, you know. Okay, got it. No, got it, Fernando. Good. Look, my point, I believe Michael is right here, but there is a completely different angle for that. It's not about, basic income is not about prosperity. Basic income is about safety and inclusiveness and cohesion. And for every society, and we don't have, at least yet, a kind of global society, it's getting closer, of course, but we still have mainly national societies. We don't have European society, for example. Yeah, we have Italian society. So in every case there should be a political answer for that. So you can't have just one fits all approach here. In some cases, I believe introducing basic income could be a good idea. But we need really to think through the consequences, the challenges, and to understand that we need to balance competitiveness and prosperity. And because prosperity is about competitiveness, it's clear, yeah? And of course, this level of safety and cohesion. So the whole, you know, to get it from the different angles, the whole common agricultural policy in the European Union is mainly about inclusiveness and cohesion and the whole space. So the basic income for me is the way how to push this cohesion forward. And again, you can't get a kind of fundamental global answer for that. We are far from there. In the sense of universal, basic income, I'm very skeptical. In the sense of partial basic income, in the sense of safety and cohesion, I believe we should be open to that. Simply point.
Thank you so much. It was a provocative point, but I think you very much clarified the importance of distinguishing between the economic prosperity and the social prosperity. So the fact of inclusion, which is very much in line with the universal basic income. So I'm not missing the opportunity to introduce Professor Arturo Bris from IMD. He's one of the most renowned expert when it comes to world competitiveness, and there is a question in the panel that maybe might bring Professor Bris directly into the debate, because some people from the audience ask, which is the future of education when it comes to redesigning competitiveness, especially the future of education. An important business school like IMD is one of those, and Harvard and Stanford and several others. In terms of their business model for the future, what we need to do. So you are more knowledgeable than me to tackle these questions. So I'm opening to your point and to your introduction.
Good afternoon, Fernando, and hello everybody. Special thanks to our partners in Ukraine, MIM, and all of our friends in the country. I'm very glad to talk about education, because whoever has been listening to the IMD World Competitiveness Center statements over the last years, we have actually claimed that education is the first pillar of the competitiveness of a country. I think with COVID-19, there are two fundamental changes that are going to be important. Number one is that technology is going to play a new role. So obviously, and I'm sure you have discussed that already, but in the 21st century world post-COVID, technology is going to play a different role. We already knew that technology was important, but actually technology is going to redefine everything that we do, including public policy. And because of that, education has to concentrate on technology and technological topics and fields. Okay? I think the second important aspect that is related to education is that as COVID-19 is building walls across countries, and among countries, I think that we're going through an era of deglobalization. And this means that we're going to focus much more on domestic and local markets. And therefore, I think attraction of talent and retention of talent, they're going to be seen with different eye. In other words, I think that countries like in the European Union or Ukraine or in Latin America, they will have to appeal much more to their local talent for certain jobs. There are regions in the world, for example, in the Middle East, where they need to appeal to foreign talent for whatever they do and need. And I think this appeal for local talent means that we need to give much more importance to our education systems than before. And this includes, finally, Fernando, obviously, business education as well. Because, for example, in our World Competitiveness ranking for this year in Ukraine, the quality of business education has been improving. MIM certainly is an amazing player there, but it has to play a stronger role, because we need to educate our executives much more than before. And I think that being education important, I think in the post-COVID world is even more important.
Arturo, we were discussing before you joined us about the importance of transferable skills. So the fact that is very much, the case in the post-pandemic to have those skills that might not just be used for your core business, for that specific vertical industry you're in, but to adjacent business, and to have a sort of horizontal perspective to competencies. Do you see also this phenomenon from your important observatory?
This is fantastic. You see, one of my books that I wrote 2 years ago, the title is Flex or Fail, about that. And so, because what you say is that from the perspective of the employee, I need to preserve my transferable skills. But I also want to refer to another aspect of it, which is companies. That is, for companies, it's very important that they provide employees with those transferable skills. It's very important. Banks typically educate their employees in banking skills. Technology companies, technology skills. Marketing companies in marketing skills. And I think it's very important that companies, they change. That's what we call flex or fail, you see? That companies change their mindset, because as an organization, you need to start preparing your employees for their next job, which is probably not with you, okay? And that's very hard to do, but that's very important, because in the coming years, and especially with the new generation, people are not going to have a lifetime job. They're going to be changing tasks and activities. So if I want to attract talent to my company today, they need to know that while they're with me, they're going to be training for their next job, okay? And that's a very important point of skill transfer. It's not just the responsibility of the individual employee, it's also the responsibility of the employer.
Yeah, that's a super crucial point, and it's very much in line with another things that we have been discussing so far, which is the contraposition between preparedness on one side and predictability on the other side. No, so when we talk about the future, and this has become an increasing topic during the pandemic and after the pandemic, you know, the idea of thinking about the future and the future-oriented business and those kind of things. We always confuse the future with the prediction rather than with the preparedness. So what do you think about this contraposition between preparedness and prediction first, and then second, how would you suggest to get prepared to be competitive for tackling the post-pandemic?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that what I have learned certainly in this crisis is that the predictions do not even approximately work. I mean, nobody was prepared for the current crisis, and it's true that you appeal to resiliency as a skill to be adaptable. So I think that we need first awareness that whichever crisis is going to be next, it is going to be very difficult to see or to know what this is going to be. And second, we need to build resilient mindsets. That is, we need to be prepared for the worst case scenario constantly and revising our expectations. So this I think is going to be, has proven key in the current crisis, because to me the problem is not our inability to predict what has happened. I think it's our inability to cope with the impact, because we were not prepared for that. And that's a terrible thing, recognition that we were not prepared. So as you said, I think resilience is going to be a major skill.
And this is very much in line with what Mr. Klimkin said before in very much details. When it comes to get prepared, of course, the role of business school and the role of university has always been very much important. And I remember a question that I saw before from Alexander. He said, what is relevant from past success stories? No, because those important business schools like yours and mine and several others, they are typically building on past success stories and successful cases now where you might learn from. And it seems that all of a sudden we are using a sort of eraser and canceling, and erasing all the things, all the recipes, all the indications that were known before. So how to get prepared, and what do you think could be a good indication for firms and for clusters and for countries like Ukraine to get prepared, and instead of looking back, looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, the point that you make about business schools is exactly true, because having been used to the case study, then you realize that cases are not very helpful, especially these days. And I think to me the two lessons from the point of business education, I think the two lessons from this crisis are, number one, that I think we should abandon the halo effect in our teaching. That is, we should stop teaching about successful cases, and companies that did right, and why did they succeed or they fail. I think that looking at past failures or successes is going to be useless. And there are no recipes, because I think very often we try to write recipes for business success based on the case studies. And I think that the second lesson, and it is something that we need to incorporate much more in our courses, is moving away from skill-based training, teaching tools, and teaching much more about behaviors. And for example, when we talk about resiliency, learn how to react, learn how to work in a team, learn how to collaborate, learn how to deal, for example, with non-market issues or how to negotiate with governments. This type of behaviors, I think, is much more important than teaching tools, okay, like discounted cash flows to try and predict the future. But it's very disappointing because, as you will know, Fernando, this is what we have been doing at business schools for the last, 30 years, 40 years. And I think it calls for a complete reconsideration, because to the extent that we have been able to predict the crisis based on our tools, executives will come to us and they will say, what do you need to offer to us? And we cannot offer tools because they are not useful. I think we need to offer, learning from behaviors, or at least, how to build certain behaviors and the right behaviors.
That's an interesting point that you raised, Artur. I would like to bring in Mr. Klimkin again, and not to see him too much relaxing in our debate. No, because I'm thinking about how important is the education system, and the point that Professor Bris just raised. What do you think are the most relevant and urgent intervention when it comes to education in Ukraine and in the neighbor countries, as you see? So, which is the number one point in the agenda of a politician when it comes to education in your place? And then I will open to Arturo again to know it from the global perspective. So, what should be the number one point in the agenda when it comes to investing in education? So, Mr. You're mute.
Sorry. It's just for having better sound quality. Zoom, unfortunately, is not perfect, despite the fact that we've been living on Zoom now for 6 months. Life isn't perfect. On education, we've been definitely lagging behind on education, even if you take it in the sense of regional benchmarks. One is the primary and secondary education. We still don't have really good educational content. We still don't have cloud to put this content in. We still have, our kids going to schools with paperback books, which is something completely mind-blowing for the 21st century, both from the point of education and also from the point of, let's say, conscious approach to ecology. So for me, it's all rubbish. According to the recent PISA, report, we've been doing not well in big cities, but we've been doing really bad outside big cities. And it's a kind of fragmented system of education. Cities are still, not medium level, but okay. But in the countryside, education is almost not present. Secondly, it's our higher education. And just imagine, we have up to 300, to be exact, 278 universities and their branches in Ukraine. How can you have, with our resources, intellectual and financial resources, how can you have so many universities in the country? And it's a lot of pandemic corruption browsing around. And on the top of that is, of course, the issue of business education, which has been getting better. I believe we are exactly not there, but it's a kind of network of business education. So you are not focused on your peripheral reality. But if you ask me, education, yeah, together with health, but it's a different one. It's the most important point, how you shape up your human capital in the future. And it's getting global because you are shaping it up nationally, but it become global. And there should be an issue how to manage this all kind of balances and nuances around. But on education, I agree with you. It's one of the most important challenges for Ukraine right now.
Thanks a lot. Same question to Professor Bris. So, which is on top of the pyramid when it comes to?
No, but I actually I love what Pablo just said, because if and that's also something that I have been advocating for. If you look at the successful countries when it comes to education, they have been concentrating their efforts. And even when it comes to institutions, I mean, you have MIT, Stanford in the United States. These are probably not good cases because they're private institutions, but you have Karlsruhe Institute in Germany. You have the federal schools in Switzerland. You have King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia. You have the new university that President Macron has created in France. I think the key to having an excellent, the key to having a good education system, especially at the university level, is to build centers of excellence. And the key to build the center of excellence is to focus. And in Ukraine, I follow completely that recommendation, is that if the country could focus its effort on a top institution that could be, in the business education case, we already have it, it's me, but for a larger university education, focus the effort on a single institution, this would be an amazing step forward, okay? Because I challenge the country to have a university among the top 10 universities in the world. That should be a KPI for any government in the country. But of course, this requires focused efforts. Okay, in the moment that you just distribute funds geographically or to different interests, then there is no quality and there is no excellence, which is what we need.
And thank you, Arturo. This proves to be very much the case also when it comes to clusters worldwide. So those countries that are performing better are those who are investing on the excellence of one specific cluster, and then internationalize that activities in other clusters that have a kind of different role in the ecosystem. So I'm thinking about the Netherlands with the importance flower cluster and the internationalization of those competencies worldwide in many different countries, each one of them positioned at a different level of competition. And of course, the more you create excellence, the more you are strengthening your strength. As my mentor, Professor Porter, always says, it's definitely better to strengthen your strengths rather to cover your weaknesses. And this is very much in line with what you just said. So I'm seeing Miss Irina Tiomkova who's there, and she's the president of the International Management Institute, the MINKIV, and we were discussing about business school and the importance of university. So I will leave the floor to her. And I thank everybody for inviting me and for such an interesting debate today. I'm gonna leave in a few minutes because I have another online web conference to jump in. So thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Klimkin, and thank you, Arturo Bris, for that. So I'll leave the floor to you.
I would like to use the opportunity that Arturo Bris is on the panel, and Arturo is director of Center of Competitiveness of IMD, and maybe the main project of research project of the center is annual book of competitiveness ranking, and we as MINKIV, we're part of this research project. And I would like to ask Arturo how the index, the ranking, could help in policy making.
Hi, Irina. How are you? Nice to speak to you and nice to see you. And as I said at the beginning of my discussion, thank you, and obviously on behalf of the World Competitiveness Center, thank you personally to you as well for all these last years of support and work together. I think
Thank you.
I like your question because if you see what has been happening in the last 5 years, I think that there has been a significant transformation in governmental objectives, so that today, for most governments, I think it is understood that competitiveness is the right KPI. And I'm not talking about rankings. I don't think of rankings as a KPI, but I think that when governments think of their objective of policy, they think about employment, prosperity, quality of life, economic performance, and at the end of the day, all of these factors together is what we call the competitiveness of a country. So in that sense, you know, having the right objective is the first step to having the right policies. Of course, the problem is that, as we say in business school, you know, you can only manage what you can measure. And something that we try to do in our center is to measure competitiveness, because it's very difficult to measure, as it is difficult to measure prosperity, quality of life, or happiness. We try to measure that. And you know, we're not the only ones, but I think that's our goal as an institution. We try to help governments to tell them, by looking at our measure, what they can improve. And that's what we have been doing for the last 30 years, as you know well. So I would say that rather than rankings per se being important, that is the fact that Ukraine is number 55 in our ranking, and not 40, is not truly meaningful, because you cannot compare Ukraine with Singapore, okay, which ranks number 1 in our ranking. You cannot compare, and I think the rankings would give you this wrong perspective. But I think rankings can help at understanding what are the value drivers of those rankings. Okay, so if, for example, you know, we see that the weakness of Ukraine is still on the government efficiency side, particularly on regulation, transparency, corruption, then you know what are the value drivers of your competitiveness model. And finally, let me tell you that in the last 5 years, I have seen an amazing increasing interest in what we do from governments all over the world. Obviously, Ukraine has been our partner for many years. Okay, there are countries like I don't know, the United Arab Emirates, Singapore, Thailand, Peru, in Europe, the Netherlands, Denmark, that have worried historically about competitiveness. But increasingly over the last year, we have been talking to governments of China, France, the United States, Canada, Argentina, countries that in the past were completely ignorant of what we were doing. And I think this is a very strong signal. Okay, I think it's a very strong signal, because even President Trump has actually mentioned competitiveness as a goal, or at least as a metric of the performance of his tenure. So I think rankings are becoming more important. Okay, and finally, and this is truly my final point about this, I think the COVID-19 crisis shows that governments are now more important than ever. Okay, we're in a deglobalized economy. So in a deglobalized economy, the government of Ukraine will matter much more now than 5 years ago. And the decisions that are made at the governmental level are going to matter much more, because the fate of Ukrainians and the fate of Ukrainian companies depends much more on governmental policies. So because of that, I think actually, because governments are now more important than ever, then competitiveness and what Irina, you and I do actually becomes more important than ever.
Mm-hmm. And I think Pavlo wants to say something. Pavlo?
Look, I'm a bit skeptical about using just index approach to the issues of education, and I fully agree here with Arturo. He has a point. Of course, to have all kind of indexes is very helpful. It shows you the way, shows you some tendencies, but fundamentally, every political strategy should be customized. Should be customized to particular society, and education is a very good point for that. So if you have a look on our indexes, I mean economic performance, social performance, they are partly very good in understanding where we are and partly misleading. So at the end of the day, indexes is important part of the exercise of this equation, but it's not about everything. You know, to get better a couple of positions in some particular indexes does not mean you are getting better towards your goal. Simply rephrasing a bit what Arturo has just said.
Yeah, exactly, and it works in both directions. That is, in the same way that I see sometimes when I speak in the Ukraine that people are very worried because we are in the bottom 10 of our competitiveness rankings. I see the opposite behavior, which is in countries like Singapore or Switzerland that are top 5. They say, "Wow, we're in the perfect place. We're in the right place," and I think that's also a mistake because being number 1 or number 54 or 55 depends a lot on your preconditions, your neighbors, your geographical position, your access to natural resources, the size of your country, the population, and that you cannot control. So in essence, there are countries that because of what they are, because they are not a democracy and because they are small and because they are located in the center of trade of the world economy, like Singapore, then they can be number 1. But there are countries that are not in the right place or in the right geographical place, or their economy depends too much on natural resources that cannot be in the top 10 or in the top 30. So I think every country needs to play with its own resources and manage its own competitiveness in a different way. Rankings only give you a reference, but not the solution to all of your problems.
We are almost at the end of our day discussion. And I would like to ask you to say a few words at the end of our discussion, because our theme was the strategy of competitiveness of post-COVID world. Maybe you can say a few. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Because I have a sign that my microphone was turned off. So we almost at the end of our day of discussion. And I would like to ask you to say a few words about the last, finish words, about the main theme of our discussion for today. The theme was the strategy of competitiveness in the post-COVID life. And please say something positive. Arturo, please.
So I will say something positive because I think that in the post-pandemic there are two issues that are going to be key for countries to recover well. One is the health of the public finances, and that's again something that you need to have done before the crisis. So countries like Switzerland, Germany, Singapore are going to recover fast. But the second aspect is technology. And to the extent that technology plays a fundamental role in your economy, I think you will prosper much better. And this is where I think Ukraine's strength is going to be. I think Ukraine, as many other countries in Eastern Europe, is one of the dominant countries in the world when it comes to digital innovation. You know that it's full of young innovators. I get impressed every time I go to Kiev, how many new ideas, how well you play with technology, and how technologically advanced you are when it comes to talent. And I think this would be your strength for the future. When it comes to attitudes towards technology, our latest ranking shows based on surveys that the individual attitudes in the Ukraine with respect to technology are way more favorable than in Switzerland, for example. And I think that should be the key to your future, because you have once you have the right talent, and Ukraine does have the right talent, I think the rest is much easier to win. And that would be my note of optimism.
Thank you very much, Arturo. And Pavlo, please.
Look, I can't agree more. And there is a favor, if the wind is blowing, you need to build windmills, not to build fences. So if we have such an opportunities, we simply have to embrace these opportunities. It can be done like before. And the whole, so to say, good legacy and good intellectual stuff from Michael Porter about getting competencies in every bit of the chain is still valid. But you can't simply apply the same approach as before and to be competitive. It requires actually more, and it's what this chat is all about. So proud to be part of this chat, and it was good to chat with great people, and I hope it should be helpful for the people around us. Thanks a lot. Bye.